So before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. So this is your session. We encourage interactions. Please add questions and comments to the chat. Please mute your mics. And during the QA session, you can also raise your hand in addition to put questions in the chat. Lastly, we are recording this session. If you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off and mute your webcam. Then next slide, please. Then we will have our guest speaker, Shelley Gotchamer. She's the Vice President of the Global Programs and Stakeholder Engagement from Accelerating Circularity. So hi, Shelley, please take it over.
Great, can you go to the next slide? Fantastic. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here with you today. Once again, I'm Shelley Gotchamer, Vice President of Global Programs at Accelerating Circularity. Next slide. Accelerating Circularity is a nonprofit focused on building circular systems that turn used textiles into new raw materials. And what we're really here to do is to address the problem of waste in the textile industry. And we do this in several different ways through education. We have a suite of open source tools and directories. And one of our main focuses is on executing trials at commercial scale that connect the entire value chain, and our vision is a world where textiles are no longer wasted. Next slide. Globally, as an industry, we produce a lot of materials, and per the Textile Exchange report from last year, that's 116 million tons of virgin materials each year. And we know that 92 million tons end up in the landfill. And let's pause for a moment and let that sink in. 92 million tons of textiles go to the landfill each year. Next slide. And generally speaking, these materials that we make outlast the products that they were intended for. So we really have to figure out how do we reuse these materials, which is a potential economic and environmental unlock if we can utilize these and reuse them again. But for this unlock to happen, we really need circular systems, and we need these systems to scale in parallel. Next slide. And at Accelerating Circularity, we take a systems approach. This is a virtual event, but typically I would have flown in to present at this event. And the way we like to think about it, without an airport, the ground crew, flight control, that airplane would not have landed, let alone take off. And that's the system. And that's what we need for textile-to-textile recycling. And what this means for us, we're not focused on a single material recycling method or technology, and we connect the entire value chain from collectors, sorters, pre-processors, recyclers, and manufacturers with brands and retailers for that pull-through. And our mission is to create systems that can grow within the supply chain to become value-driven supply chains in of themselves with post-consumer content at the core. Next one. And along with education, our open source tools and directories, once again, our main focus is to demonstrate the feasibility of textile-to-textile recycling through commercial trials. And we recently wrapped up our phase 1 trials, and those trials included 74 separate participants across multiple categories, and in total, results post-consumer feedstocks. And these post-consumer feedstocks, they're essentially from the wild. And what that means, or better put, from grandma's closet. And I really want to thank our generous stakeholders for their support, our steering committee, trial partners, and of course the Walmart Foundation. And it's the work around our phase 1 trials that I want to talk about today. Next slide. The trials that we did were to commercialize specific technologies and processes. However, our focus again was on developing a whole system of engaged participants who could scale circularity. And with this in mind, the trials were structured in 4 phases geared towards fostering consensus among participants. The first of these phases we call research and mapping, and this is where we identified end users and supply chain partners to start mapping out the textile-to-textile value chain. The second phase, modeling and linking, is where we form working groups to set the parameters of the program, such as specific targets and timelines. These trial guidelines were established to ensure everybody was working within the same framework. And within these 2 stages, we identified stakeholder challenges at various levels, such as getting brands and retailers to align on what products to make as materials were shared to meet minimums. There were also challenges in feedstock development, capacity and capability for sorters and preprocessors to meet the specs that aligned with recyclers. And then the third and fourth stages were execution and then evaluation. Next slide. Ultimately, we sourced 45 metric tons of post-consumer textiles for these global trials. And the feedstock development between the Americas and Europe varied based on local market drivers. And in the Americas, sorting for textile-to-textile recycling feedstocks is a relatively new process. So we tasked multiple collector sorters with supplying material that met a single, very stringent specification to be shared across all of our cotton trials. Finding vendors willing to meet the spec was very challenging and took more than a year. All U.S. feedstocks were sorted by hand with assistance from a handheld or tabletop NIR scanner. And we learned that NIR-enabled sorting only adds value when each item is sorted. If you do not scan each piece, contamination can result. Europe's collecting and sorting infrastructure is more advanced than here in the Americas, and this allowed us to test multiple feedstock qualities. As well, we were able to use a limited amount of automated sorting. And in both the Americas and Europe, all pre-processing was done by hand, which is super slow and adds a ton of cost. Next slide. For manufacturing, different approaches were used across the 2 regions, solely driven on market capabilities. Europe's minimums are much lower, around 1,000 pounds for spinning, whereas in the US, they are more like 4,000 pounds. Also, the technology is more advanced in Europe, at least at the cotton side, and they were able to ring spun up to a 30s count, whereas in the US, we spun 20s open end. That required an additional card. And I believe that Mexico was able to process up to a 26 singles also open end. Throughout the trials, we targeted the highest percent of post-consumer content as possible, which in the end product ranges between 20 and 30%. In the US, our most commercialized feedstock is a 50% post-industrial and a 50% post-consumer, which we call the ACP blend. It's in fiber, which will then be additionally blended to make up the total content in a product. In Europe, the batch sizes were much smaller, and we had multiple feedstock blends that included post-consumer and post-industrial, and in some instances were blended with polyester. And in both regions, we're just starting to process either thermomechanical or chemically recycled polyester. From the yarns, we were able to produce jerseys, denim, canvas, and shirting. And for the most part, our brand partners bought in at the yarn or material stage and then brought those materials into their own cut and sew facilities. Next slide. The trials were benchmarked against several categories: cost and quality, with the intent to show that circular materials meet industry standards. Costing, as we know, in anything new and innovative is always a challenge. The evaluation of costing baselines was informed by market pricing of similar preferred fibers, such as rPET or organic cotton, against their premium conventional counterparts. Considering the trends, the cost baselines were established at around 30% above comparable conventional materials to accommodate premiums for preferred materials. As a nonprofit, for operations that were super inefficient or new and innovative, we were able to help subsidize to keep those costs as close to 30% premium as possible. For quality, we tested materials at each manufacturing stage against standardized testing, such as fiber analysis, dimensional stability, strength, color fastness, pilling, abrasion, and for the most part, there were no failures. However, what we did learn, though, especially in denim, that more abrasive washdowns created problems in tensile strength, which in of itself is not particular to recycled, however, a learning nonetheless. Next slide. The trials in both regions set out to answer key questions. Will the presence of legacy chemicals in post-consumer textiles cause RSL test failures in feedstocks? And for transparency, the data that we're looking at here is reflective of our cotton trials only. Feedstocks from both regions were tested against the AFFIRM RSL list by our partner BV. The cotton-rich materials from the Americas passed, and 3 out of the 5 European materials passed. One of the failures in Europe that we had, we detected passable limits of heavy metals, organic compounds, and phthalates. By testing at the feedstock stage, we were then able to blend out these impurities, and when tested at the material stage, the substances were well below detectable limits. So our learning is that there is opportunity to blend out these impurities. In one other supply chain, which is polycotton, there was a lone failure with an unacceptable level of chlorinated benzenes and toolings that were detected, and we suspect came from the colored polyester content. Next slide. So in conclusion, the results of the trials in the Americas and Europe showcase the feasibility and value of engaging in circular textile-to-textile recycling systems. And we demonstrated that post-consumer feedstock requires precise sorting and complete detrimming. Color sorting holds particular importance because with some recyclers, the input color mirrors the output color. Partners in both regions possess the capability to sort into numerous color classifications, facilitating over-dye of circular materials when sorted into lights and whites. The adoption of automation in this domain will play a pivotal role in advancing system maturity. We found that recycled cotton fibers can pass standard RSL testing and that minor detections are in a range that can be effectively blended out. This blending process is already necessary for mechanically recycled cotton to enhance fiber length and strength. From those fibers, we developed a wide range of yarns, including finer ranges that we had previously thought were not possible, up to 26 singles in Americas, and a range of ring-spun yarns in the 30s from Europe. Fabrics made from these yarns pass standard performance quality criteria, including pilling and other areas of concern for brand partners for finished product marketability. In denim washdowns, to obtain lightest colors negatively impacts fabric strength, so designers must evaluate the trade-off between the desired color and the strength testing baseline. We also developed a greater understanding of the barriers to scale and widespread adoption, as well as some potential solutions. As an example, long lead times are a challenge to sort and pre-process adequate quantities of post-consumer feedstock, and automation will greatly improve quality and speed in feedstock preparation. And we're going to be testing this in our next phase of work, building circular systems. Shipping used textiles and recycled fiber across borders can present challenges, and education is a key in overcoming regulatory barriers created by the novelty of this product category. Yarn spinners must adapt settings to accommodate special characteristics of recycled fibers, and they can invest in flexible facilities that can more easily adapt to the diversity of post-consumer content. Next slide. And finally, we have commercialized product in the market, which is made with 26% post-consumer recycled content. On the screen, you see a skirt from Target and a jean from Contour. And this is really a super exciting moment for us and our partners and demonstrates the feasibility of textile-to-textile recycling. Next slide. And then Accelerating Circularity has some pretty audacious goals. We recently joined the Clinton Global Initiative with a commitment to collaborate with brands and manufacturers across US and Europe to recycle 325 metric tons of post-consumer textiles. This includes 150 metric tons of cotton, 100 metric tons of polyester, and 75 metric tons of other fiber. The goal is to create a strong market where recycled textiles are used to make new products that people want to buy. And based on our learnings from our previous work, we think this metric ton target is possible. The supply chain is ready. We have a lot of work to do. And as a call to action, I hope you could join us. And then the last slide is just a thank you. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very comprehensive. So let me see the chat. So I think I can kick off the QA session. So we're talking about the textile recycling. So how does the organization define the successful textile-to-textile recycling system?
ultimately, by demonstrating that there's product on the market that's commercial. And two of our partners, Target and Contour, and another one, which I can't name yet, is about to have product in the market at retail for sale. And we think that really demonstrates success.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So maybe I can continue another question. So how does the textile industry contribute to the global greenhouse gas emissions? And what has been done to mitigate this impact?
I'm not going to quote numbers because depending on the source, there's a bunch of different numbers out there, but virgin materials we know have an impact. And when you use recycled content, we believe that it has a lower greenhouse gas footprint.
Yeah. There's a question from the chat. I was wondering, so the person D, he has been asking, I was wondering what was the care label looks like for the fiber content. Does it say post-consumer fiber, or what are the challenges with the labeling and the fiber content?
I believe it only says recycled content. It's not delineated between post-consumer or post-industrial content, only recycled, which is a really great question. It would be really nice to have post-consumer targets for recycled content because most recycled is post-industrial.
Yeah. I guess also there will be no information about the chemically or like the physically recycled information. So in general, just the recycled.
Correct.
Then how do the different supply chains in the US and the EU, they approach the fabric development for this recycling?
Can you repeat that question?
Yes, so my question is, how do the different supply chain, like in the US and the EU, how do they approach this fabric development for recycling differently?
The minimums in Europe are a lot lower. So you could knit or weave around 1,000 yards, where in the Americas it was up to 10,000. So the development stage in Europe, there were a lot more fabrics that were trialed in development than there were in the Americas, really driven by that minimum quantity. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that answers the question. So what is the minimum quantity since you mentioned that?
In Europe, it was 1,000 yards, and in the Americas, I believe the denim was 10,000, which is even a small lot for denim.
So what caused this difference?
Cost difference. The costing is around 30% over conventional materials, but it was also subsidized through the program.
Okay, that's helpful. So there's another question from the online. Have there been any challenges or considerations your partners have taken into account for color accuracy in production when using both new and post-consumer materials? Or have these blends been performing similar to conventional materials?
Yeah, I would say it was a learning across the board for everybody. we strive to meet conventional physical property testing, but that varies between brands and is not exactly static between method and standard. So that was a little bit of a challenge trying to align everybody's standards. I think our biggest learnings were really in the denim space, which I don't really think is that much of a surprise, because when you wash down denim, you can have performance problems regardless of recycled content. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Shelley, when you talk about this denim, we know denim normally it has two different materials, two or more. Typically, the warp is cotton, weft will be synthetic. When we recycle them, we're going to treat them differently? Or when we do the evaluation, test them, they're going to have different standard?
I believe, but don't quote me on that, that we use the post-consumer, the ACP blend in the weft, not the warp for strength.
Oh, I see. So the warp is still cotton. Yeah, that's the recycled weft. Oh, that's clear. That's helpful. Yeah. There's another question in the chat. If fibers contains PFAS, how that can be removed during the recycling to bring back into the production? Because PFAS removal is important to ensure that recycled fibers do not contain the PFAS.
Yeah, this is a real touchy point, especially with all the regulation happening new, upcoming, and whatever is in place today. We don't see too much PFAS on cotton products. It's mostly in the synthetic world. My understanding, yet to be proven, is that chemical recycling can remove PFAS. So mechanical recycling or thermomechanical, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I would believe PFAS is very important because these regulations we're going to try best, especially from the chemical recycling, try to remove as much as possible to maintain this environmental friendly component.
Yeah.
So next question is, have you manufactured any industry sewing thread using the cheap extruded with the high intrinsic viscosities from post-consumer or industrial recycled materials?
Sewing thread, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. We haven't really dabbled in sewing threads. I don't really have an answer for this question other than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sewing thread, they're gonna have different linear density, like typically a little bit bigger than the regular fibers, and they have high twist. So I would think it's a different species compared with the regular yarns in the pre or post consumers.
Yeah.
So maybe another question. So what are the biggest technical and the logistical barriers to scaling this textile-to-textile recycling?
I would say putting together the supply chains in the very beginning for these first trials. They took up to a year to get sorter collectors, pre-processors, and recyclers not only to talk to us, but to talk to each other and to work together on a specification that could then be made into material.
Next question is from the chat. Did the newly recycled cotton yarns have any hardness issues? compared to the virgin cotton yarns?
Yeah, so in our testing, the materials passed fill. And it's important to remember our ACP blend used post-consumer and post-industrial due to the shorter fiber length in post-consumer, which then helps with the hairiness in the pill.
Then for this hairiness, how do we improve the hairiness then?
Yeah, so you improve it by using carrier fibers, especially in post-consumer recycled content. You need a carrier fiber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have questions, please put in the chat or raise your hand. Maybe next question. So what the key insights have been gained from the research and the mapping the efforts regarding feedstock sourcing and the processing?
Feedstock sourcing, certain recyclers, depending upon the technology, need either 95% purity or close to that. That's a learning. Mm-hmm. Also, automated sorting is going to speed up and help with the accurateness and the quality. Pre-processing and detrimming is super slow, and automation is just starting in that arena, and we need all of those systems to be able to scale together to meet recyclers' demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was helpful. Yeah, the supply chain is very important. Yeah, as well as this feedstock sourcing. Another question: there are multiple avenues for textile recycling. How do you determine the highest circular potential?
So in this question, the multiple avenues, at least personally in my mind, are downcycling versus upcycling, whether it's wiper shoddy, but we try to do it accelerating circularity is to put that content into new materials. So that's really what our focus is in this textile to textile for wearing apparel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next question is, how is the various chemicals or finishes on recycled garments or articles addressed in the recycling process?
This is our favorite answer. It depends. So depending on the recycling technology, you may or may not be able to recycle those finishes. And it's really, if I think about technical apparel, which I think is where most of those finishes are, chemical recycling is the answer, and it's really important to scale those technologies.
Yeah, these days for the garments, many of them have this DWR treatment or softener, more silicone coatings. Yeah, so which make the recycling process to be more challenging. Our next question is there an estimate of how many times the material can be recycled?
Yes, and it depends on what material it is. Mechanically recycled cotton, the fiber continuously breaks down. I don't have the stats top of mind. Polyester, I believe, is the same, but I'm not a technical expert in that. And I think there's only one material that can be infinitely recycled, and it's in the nylon family. And I always get 6,6 and 6, but one of those can be continually recycled. It's a step in the right direction.
Mhm. So I would believe like for the cottons normally is the natural fiber from mechanical, the length is coming shorter, which gonna make a recycled cotton. If we still use it as a regular cotton, gonna be more challenging. Synthetic, yeah, gonna be differently compared with that, especially, the extrusion, the process will be different. So the recycle time will also be different. Next question is,
Yeah.
what are some resources to learn more about circularity in textiles and textile recycling?
There's a lot of
books.
papers out there.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you look on Accelerating Circularity website, we have a lot of papers that we've written. I think Ellen MacArthur also has some good resources. Books, I don't know.
Yeah. There are a lot of online resources. We know Cotton Incorporated or Textile Exchange, or you can Google anything about textile recycling. Yeah, there's a textile-to-textile recycling. There's also this plastic bottles recycling. So Shannon, you have been saying like from the beginning, Accelerating Circularity has been doing many trials to get started. So we're wondering, so which regions are you working on this recycling besides this EU and US? Is more global or is more US and the EU mainly?
Mostly we call it the Americas because it includes Canada, Mexico, El Salvador. I'm trying to remember who's in that suite there. And then in Europe, Turkey too. And we're considering Asia, but that may be the next phase. We're really concentrating on where we feel the most waste is created.
Mm-hmm. So in the future, do we have any plan for the Asian area? Since Asian, like China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, they have a lot of textile garment manufacture. We think they have a lot of at least the pre-consumer waste. Do we have any plan in the future for those regions?
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum because I think the most volume of textile waste is between the Americas and Europe, but the textile manufacturing is centered in Asia. So somehow we have to bring these things together. Definitely something we're thinking about.
Any other questions from the chat? Yeah, please feel free to raise your hand or put your questions in the chat. So may I ask, so what are the Accelerating Circularity, the 2026, the targets for recycled materials? And what steps are being taken to achieve these?
Yeah, so thinking about our phase 1 trial where we recycled just under 50 metric tons of post-consumer content, we're really upping that to 325 metric tons, so it's a big jump. We feel that the supply chain is ready. There are supply chains that can meet this demand, but getting brands and retailers on the uptake is really one of the bigger challenges. And to have a circular system, you need everybody, and we need product on market. The steps that we're taking is really aligning the supply chains through the linking and modeling phase and recruiting brands and retailers to join us to buy this product. And that's where we're at now.
That was that full, yeah. Let's see if there's any other question in the chat. No question for now. So may I ask, you give examples, talk about the regular or universal thread. They have been incorporating the recycled materials in the products. Normally they do like 100% or certain amount of percentage, or is there any standard saying which percentage going to be for us to quantify as a recycled product?
It depends. Our favorite answer
Depends.
Depending on the recycling technology, you can have more recycled content, like in polyester, whereas mechanically recycled cotton, it's a little harder. And there isn't necessarily like a feedstock standard, because feedstocks are as varied as the yarns that they produce. I'm not sure I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So may I ask any questions from the audience? Yeah, please feel free to raise your hand or put the question in the chat. There's no questions at this moment. So may I ask Shania, shall we continue with any other questions, or we move to the next slide?
Yeah, I think we have one more question. I see Sutton's hand up. Sutton, if you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Hello?
Let's see. Maybe that was. Hi, Sutton. Can you hear us? Yes. Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, please feel free, ask your question.
Yeah,
We can't hear your question, but please feel free to type in the chat. And Andrew is typing on as well. And we have one more from Sean Meeks as well.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Hi. My question was just if there are plans to expand out, for example, into leather.
At Accelerating Circularity, no, but I know there are other organizations that are utilizing recycled leather.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
There's one more question in the chat. So there are startups such as Sari, I hope my pronunciation is right. So SYRE, which are specializing in specific recycled yarns. Is there any plan to define an accelerated circularity to brand a recycled yarn name?
At Accelerating Circularity, we're a nonprofit, and we're focused on the system. So we don't really focus on a single recycling technology or a single yarn, so therefore would not be branding a yarn as accelerating circularity, but support as much as we can partners such as 5A in their endeavors for chemical recycling.
Yeah, so next question is, in synthetic circularity, the large expense is sorting. What attempt is being made to get garment makers and designers to use a monofiber offering where sorting is almost eliminated?
That would be a dream. There are organizations that provide training and resources around designing for circularity. Most, I don't know the number, don't quote me, most garments are mixed materials. And from a practical standpoint, I think as recyclers, we need to figure out the technology that meet those market demands. It would be a lot easier if everything was a monofiber, but I just don't see it happening. I mean, maybe education would help. It's really hard to recycle mixed materials, so that at least, you know, there's the push-pull and both parties are thinking about it. It's a challenge.
Yeah, different materials have different functions. So yeah, because those functions, we put them in garments for their different performance. So yeah, single material, yeah, I feel there are less and less, yeah, in these days.
Yeah.
So any other questions from the audience? If not, we may want to thank Shelly for the great presentation. And Shania, you can take it over for, give me 1 second, there's one more question. In recycling, mechanical, chemical, synthetics, is microplastics issue greater? So Shelly, want to get this question? Nelson's asking about microplastics. Would the recycling make?
Yeah, honestly, we do not know, and we have partnered with a microfiber consortium going into our next phase of work, and we'll be testing all our materials with their testing method to get a read on recycled content, because we just don't know.
So I think there's a learning curve. We are starts recycling, but we'll learn more and more. Yeah. I think that's all the questions for now. So for everyone on the call, if you have more questions, feel free. You can send to me or send to Shelly or send to the AATCC associates there, and we can bring the questions back to Shelly and then reach back to you. So for now, I would say let's thank Shelly for the presentation and answering all the questions. Then, yeah, I feel I learned a lot. Yeah, so Shania, you can take it over to share more information. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
thank you,
Shelly.
Thank you, Shelly, for the great presentation and information. Just going to go over just a couple of closing things about upcoming with AATCC. We do have our 100th volume now available for purchase of the test methods and procedures. So that is available on our online store. And then the Foundation, AATCC Foundation, provides scholarships and grants to students. So for all you student members, please check it out online where you can apply. the applications close at the end of February. So you definitely want to get in on that. And members, if you're interested in donating to the foundation, you can also check it out there. And then for our next membership event is a chemical applications interest group meeting with the two organizations, EMPA and HiQ, and they will be talking about antimicrobial applications. And then here's some more upcoming conferences that we have. Specifically, if you're interested in circularity, we do have a circularity conference coming up in June. That's going to be at the University of Rhode Island. But all these upcoming events, their information's on the website. And if it's not yet on the website, just mark it on your calendar because more information is coming soon. And then just making sure that you're staying up to date with everything. If you're not already on our newsletter mailing list, you can go ahead and go from our website or through this QR code and just sign up with your email. And then if you have any more questions, you can ask the membership team. We're happy to help and we're always here for you. And that concludes the presentation. So thank you very much.
Yes, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah.